We're here with Doug Casey. Doug is a natural resource investing legend to many people in the commodity space. He's also a writer of many books, most recently, a series of fantastic fiction books that talks about the social, political, and economic climate and the future. So, Doug's also someone that's fantastic to talk about these great subjects about where we are headed right now, socially, economically, politically, in our future. So if you are excited about today's episode, make sure you hit the like button on this video. Give us a comment right there down below. Shout out to our sponsor, Vizsla Silver. Vizsla Silver is one of our favorite silver and gold mining stocks. They're the first sponsor ever here on our channel. So thank you, Vizsla. And Doug, it's good to see you.
Likewise, Jake, it's nice to be back.
So I saw a montage of clips recently, and it was a bunch of different world leaders and, quote unquote health ministers and stuff. And they were all spliced together, basically saying we're never going back to normal. And there was a big viral one from I think maybe the New South Wales, quote unquote health minister. And she says, we're never going back to normal. And I want to ask you, what do you think when you hear some of these types of build back better people say that we're never going back to normal?
Well, I think they're actually clinically insane. And if they're not insane, they're actually evil people. But I shouldn't be surprised, and I'm not surprised, because you have two types of people in the world from that point of view. One type of person likes to control the physical universe, manipulate things, create things. The other kind of person likes to manipulate people and tell them what to do. And that's the type of person that always goes into government. So what do you expect? Government is like a magnet attracting these psychopaths. It's just natural. I mean, government attracts these horrible people the same way as Hollywood attracts wannabe movie stars and Vegas attracts gamblers. So it just amazes me that the average person out there actually gives any credibility or pays any attention or anything to government, the very idea of the state. So yeah, I expect, look, the thing is that these people feel they have the wind in their sails right now. They've seen how easy it is to push around the average chimpanzee. He'll basically do what he's told. Lock down, stay in your house for the next month and don't go out. Much of the world has been that way. Yeah, they listen. So, since these people love power and they've seen, how effective they've been using the COVID hysteria, yeah, of course they're gonna push it. So yeah, I'm not surprised.
So one of the areas where you essentially kind of became like the infamous Doug Casey was you were on the Donahue show and you're talking about the financial system. You've been talking really about the inherent corruption of the global monetary system for a long time. And we're kind of coming to an interesting head where a lot of people, such as yourself, have talked about the collapse of currency for a long time. And yeah, we've certainly seen that decline, but we haven't seen this level at least in quite a long time of this rapid increase in prices everywhere, supply chain disruptions everywhere, ports with ships everywhere. We printed an incredible amount of money the last 24 months. And just as the time of making this video yesterday, Biden said he's got his $3.5 trillion ready. And he made headlines because he said the cost of the $3.5 trillion is actually zero. What do you think about that?
Well, as I said, I think these people are actually insane. And in addition to that, they're stupid. But let me define stupid for you. One definition I like to use of stupid is it's an unwitting tendency to self-destruction. And a lot of these people actually believe that. So it's an unwitting tendency to self-destruction. That's why comedy is funny. I mean, they're like the Three Stooges. Look, what's going to happen as a result of all this? We have genuine Bolsheviks in charge in Washington, D.C. now. They're exactly the same psychological profile as the people that took over Russia in 1917. And they're going to do all the same things that those Bolsheviks would have done, or the Jacobins in France in the 1790s. Uh, it's actually kind of predictable. And now that they've got the reins of power in Washington, they're they're not going to want to let go. So I'm not optimistic. A lot of these Republicans are optimistic that in 2022 and 2024 we'll kick the bums out because it'll be such a disaster. Let me give you another scenario, Jake. Uh, they, these people are going to make such a disaster. I can give you another number of reasons in addition why it'll turn into a disaster. But let's say things get really bad in the United States. What's going to happen is this. They'll probably get rid of Biden because he's so inept and he's notably senile. But they'll need a guy that says, look, we're in big trouble now. It's the COVID thing has made things bad, and global warming is going to make things worse. We need to do something. Government needs to do something. So they'll get some real psycho in office to kiss things and make it better. So I don't see a change in trend. And they're going to keep printing up money because if they don't keep printing up money, if the Fed doesn't keep buying securities, 120 billion a month right now, the whole financial system could collapse in a deflationary collapse. So I don't see any way out of this. I hate to be so gloom and doomy about the economy, but I just don't see any way out. Well, I don't want to go on too long, so tell me when you've got a comment or.
So you would say then that $3.5 trillion doesn't equal zero. So I want to go into the.
No, it doesn't, because if look, there's two places the government can get the money that it wants to spend. It can either tax, which means take money out of your income or take money out of your assets, or it can print money. Those are the two ways it can do it. So how can it cost zero? Because what are they going to spend this money on? It's basically going to be pork for their friends. Building bridges to nowhere, training a new set of Marxist teachers, welfare for people, paying people's rent. We've got millions of people that have been living rent-free in their landlords' houses. I know the landlords a lot of money. Well, they'll pay that off and give them free rent. And how about the millions more people that haven't paid their mortgages? That's where some of that money is going to go. So it's all going to be soft welfare type things. It's not going to be, look, it's not just zero, it's negative. It's a negative cost because it's working to destroy the actual fabric, social fabric and economic fabric of the country. It's a disaster. I mean, genuine disaster.
So we'll go into the future here in a minute, but you were talking earlier about the Bolsheviks in Russia, and you were comparing it to right now. And I heard you say that another time. And before we went into the future and kind of where we were flowing, I just wanted to nab that. How are they similar? So tell me, how are that's a statement you say quite a bit about Russia, the Bolsheviks, and right now. Can you explain to me how that is? Because I'd love to know.
I like to emphasize
Similarities.
actually to give people some perspective on these things. How are the people in the Biden regime similar to the Bolsheviks? Well, they're statists to start with. They really believe that the government is a good thing, and it should be bigger and it should control more. That's their philosophical stance from a political point of view. And they're collectivists. They don't believe really in private property. They believe that your property is everybody's property. They don't, they like living in nice houses and having nice cars, but everybody else, they're just little people. So they're collectivists, statists and collectivists. And it's a psychological problem that these people suffer from. They see that, in their opinion, the world works a certain way, and they know what that way is, and they're willing to enforce it on society. Uh, they don't believe in voluntary transactions. They believe in planning, but they don't understand that the state's planning inevitably creates chaos in the average guy's life. So it's a psychological
So
profiling.
what happened? So what happened in
It's
1919
like
when?
these people were transported by a time machine from Russia in 1917 or France in the 1790s to the U.S. today.
And what were they doing in 1719? How was their control system set up in similarities to what's going on today?
Well, I hope it doesn't get as out of control here in the United States as it did in Russia 100 years ago. I hope that uh, people that don't toe the line and do what they're told aren't eventually put into FEMA camps. I always thought this was conspiracy theory about FEMA camps, but I'm starting to think maybe they exist, and it's a place where the excuse to put them there is people that that don't take the vaccine. Perhaps you have to isolate them from the rest of society. Anything is possible. I mean, reality is actually stranger than science fiction. It actually is. And when you look back at history and the horrible things that people have done to one another throughout history, I mean, we don't even have to look at Pol Pot's Cambodia, where out of a little country with 4 million people, over a million were killed. We don't have to look at Rwanda 25 years ago, where maybe a million people were hacked to death with machetes. How can that happen in the modern world? We don't even have to go back as far as Mao's great cultural revolution in the 60s, where tens of millions of people died violently. Uh, you know, this is the way the human being acts, especially when you have a powerful state with a maniac in control or people that have a certain view of the world. I mean, they treat other people as if they were pawns or cattle, and not even free range cattle, feedlot cattle. I mean, in fact, everybody in the U.S.
More
today,
like veal.
yeah, perhaps more like veal. But people say, I've said for a long time, you know, the government treats you as a milk cow, where you know they milk you for taxes all the time, and you listen to your regulations and you stay in your stall. And after a while, if it's not good enough that you're a milk cow, they'll turn you into a beef cow. And that's actually the way it is. I mean, these people psychologically, they talk about loving your fellow man. It's all bullshit. It's all nonsense. They actually hate people. Quite frankly, yes, they really do hate other people, notwithstanding what they say. Uh, this is so true of eco hysterics that care much more about Mother Earth than they care about other people, and they're quite willing to sacrifice people and cleanse the planet of humans to save Mother Earth. Okay, Mother Earth has been here about 4.5 billion years so far, and she'll be here long after humans are gone. Although I hope humans go because they're conquering other planets as opposed to the species dies. But
So,
anyway, possible.
so let's talk. You talked a little bit about being turned into a beef cow, and then you talked a little bit about kind of the eco tyranny. And my concern is the same thing that's used for the COVID is, which was centralization of power and taking away people's rights. Well, the same thing will then be used on climate change
Yeah.
for to further the same agenda that maybe one might call the new world order, or you might just call it the World Economic Forum's Great Reset global corporate takeover. But the next iterate some of the interesting iterations of that, I don't know if you've had any time to check it out yet, on Biden's $3.5 trillion thingamajig, was mileage taxes,
Oh,
was something in there. And they said it's a pilot plan. And they said there's quote unquote volunteers. sounds similar. I watched a clip on China quite a while ago when they were getting their social credit score into high gear. They had volunteers that would spy on everyone. So these are people that'll be connected to a chip with GPS, and it'll all be tracked. And they're trying to figure out probably how to link it to your central bank digital currency and just pull it out of your account. And you'll be taxed on the number of miles you drive. And also, recently, the World Economic Forum, just in the last 7 to 14 days, has an article on their website talking about a new credit card that will track and tax your carbon emissions.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to know your thoughts on that and what you thought about Biden putting a mileage tax in there and so on.
I think it's completely insane. But I'm speaking also, I wear several hats. As an economist, I say this is completely insane. It's counterproductive. All this nonsense about carbon being the enemy element. I mean, it used to be uranium and then plutonium and then sulfur. I mean, it's like they're going through the periodic table of elements, picking new enemy elements, uh, the things that constitute the physical universe. So right now, carbon's the enemy element. But speaking as an economist, I'd say this is completely crazy. But speaking as a speculator, okay, trying to profit from the world as it is, I put 7 figures into 2 deals that are all about carbon sequestration and trading carbon credits and all that. It's completely crazy. But the world is crazy, and I'm capitalizing on the trend. It's one more bad trend. But as the economy becomes more and more unstable and more unglued, you can't. It's very important that everybody listening try to get as much capital, as much wealth as they can in a safe place, because they're going to need it in the future, uh, if only to take advantage of the tremendous opportunities caused by the distortions the government is creating in the market. But that's because, look, good speculations. If we lived in a free market society, there would not be any good speculations, because speculations are caused by distortions in the economy made by laws and inflation, regulation, things of that nature. But we're going to live in a society that is even more heavily taxed and inflated and regulated than today's. And I try to look at the bright side, even though I talk about doom and gloom a lot. And the bright side is it's going to present a lot of opportunities for speculators to capitalize on these distortions. And carbon credits is one of them that it's investable. But there are lots of others. I mean, uh, I continue to buy small gold coins. I got plenty of gold, but when I
Small, do you
find
mean like a quarter ounce, or what do you mean?
exactly, there are two reasons for that. Uh, First of all, gold isn't a good speculation now, in my opinion, because it's actually relative to other commodities and relative to houses and cars and meals and restaurants. Gold is actually kind of reasonably priced right now from a historical point of view. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy it. You should buy it, because if you're going to accumulate capital, you can either put dollars in a bank account, which is what most people do, which is stupid, because right now inflation is running 5 to 10% a year and is going much higher, and the bank is giving you essentially zero. Plus, you got the risk of keeping the money in a bank. Or you can get the money and buy small gold coins, which are fungible. There's another reason. You don't want to cross borders, incidentally, or even frankly fly with like 1 ounce gold coins, because they look like serious coins. You buy quarter-ounce gold coins, they look like small change, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, to the x-ray machine. That's what they look like. So uh, your overlords don't pay attention to them. So that's why I buy them as opposed to the 1 ounce gold coins. And this has happened to me crossing a number of borders with silver coins, which look like gold coins, or they've been stopped and they looked at, oh, it's not gold. Okay, silver, it's not worth anything. All right, so just some tips.
So where do you think we're going from here? Dr. Michael Burry from The Big Short, he says and has been saying he thinks that it could go to hyperinflation, Weimar Germany. I always thought these kinds of things were over the top. And, you mentioned, you talked about the camps and a lot of these things, maybe we've all kind of heard here or there, but getting to a point where, I was thinking about 1984, the book with Orwell, and he talks about basically how they like decondition you to words, and they change the meaning of words. And
Constantly. Yeah.
what's that?
Constantly. They do it all the time today.
And I thought about the perfect example while I watched Biden yesterday go. He goes like 3.5 trillion. It's zero. The cost is zero. Like that. Like you're an idiot. It's zero. Like that's how the energy that I felt like he was trying to say to someone. And then Jen, whatever her name is, his press secretary, uh, the circle back gal,
Yeah.
she had her clip and she said, I know none of us are mathematicians in here. Like this. She did it like this, like with this really, I know none of us are mathematicians in here where we wouldn't be here. But yeah, the cost of 3.5 trillion is going to be zero. Like, and it
You
was
know,
like, whoa.
this is a perfect example of what's been called gaslighting, a word that's, come into currency recently. And gaslighting is all about saying things that contradict reality so much it makes the listener think he's crazy. And if you keep saying something that contradicts reality, eventually, you know, it overturns your mind. You think, I must be crazy because I don't see things that way, but they say it's that way. So that's what these people are doing.
And it's so funny. So then when I heard them say that, I was like, well, how much does the United States collect or intending to collect for 2021? Any ideas what they're intending to collect between all the various taxes, including payroll and stuff?
Well, let me see, because these numbers get so big. Primitive people uh, that live in the jungles and so forth. When they count, they go one, two, three, many, because they can't keep the numbers together past three. But now we're beyond thousands, we're beyond millions, we're beyond billions, we're into trillions. I think Biden's going to have to ask his science officer what comes after a trillion pretty soon. But to answer your question, how much does the
Three,
U.S.
it's 3.8. It's expected to be about 3.85 trillion in
taxes?
tax revenue. Yeah, for 2021, and it was just a projected estimate. But what was funny, I went in. I didn't know what it was. I decided to Google it when he said the cost of 3.5 trillion was zero. So when he gaslighting, like it's literally a pathological lie. It's not that you're misguided in your statement or you're trying to make a point. It's literally the entire amount of tax revenue in a year. And he said the cost is zero. And so when I saw that, then I thought about 1984 and Orwell. I'm like, we're really getting to the point where like
war is peace, and truth is lies, and love is hate. I mean, yeah, everything's being turned around upside down. And maybe the reason they can get away with this in the US is because I understand, and it may be true, that about a quarter of the US population is on Xanax or Prozac or any of 100 other things like that that turn you into a semi-zombie. So you can't think very well. You kind of go through life in a daze. Quarter of the population. Maybe
I
that's
think
part of
it's
it.
that, but also it's that definitely. And then another element that I think can't be understated is, Project Mockingbird, which was when the CIA, admitted that they had all these huge reporters and news organizations and everyone on television down to local levels on their payroll to disseminate stories that also bled into Hollywood with the big Hollywood helping to structure movie scripts and ideas they wanted out there. And Project Mockingbird was a long time ago. There was the Senate intelligence or the Senate hearing, the Frank Church hearings, and the CIA director says yes. We had many people on our payroll, and he asked which ones, and he says, well, can we talk about some of this off the record? And it's recorded. And so now we're in this place where these swamp agencies, these black budget organizations, the real government, has a stronghold on pretty much everything. And so my concern with that is that it really does seem to be going to the next dimension, which is this type of central bank digital currency attached to a social credit score system, attached to your health pass, which attaches to your internet ID, which attaches to your carbon score emissions. And then it's basically game over.
I think you're absolutely right. That is the direction that things are going, certainly towards the social credit system, such as they have in China today. And a low social credit score will mean that you can't drive or drive much, you can't fly or fly much. This is a real problem. And of course, the average American I have no confidence, incidentally, in the wisdom of the average American voter. And I think the proof of that is that, although I think the Dems stole the last election, in fact, but hey, they legitimately elected Clinton and they legitimately elected Obama and Bush. And, these are just horrible people. So how stupid are Americans that these are the kind of people that they elect? I have no confidence in my fellow countrymen that it'll turn around. But one subject I don't know if we've broached in the past is, who are your countrymen? Are they people that you just happen to share a government ID with, that you happen to have been accidentally born in the same geographical area with? Or are your real countrymen people that you share ideas and views and interests and philosophies with? And those are the people I think are my real countrymen from all over the world.
I agree with you. And the fact of what's happening in the United States and, that tic-tac-toe that I just suggested on the, carbon emissions to the social credit score, to the central bank digital currency, to the health pass, doom. That's what makes me think about other options. It seems like this type of Davos, Great Reset, New World Order, it's all the same thing. It's just many different names, but it's the same type of setup. They seem to be going after the G7 countries. Australia, which is already disarmed, seems first. So then I'm 30, Doug. So then I've got a 14-month-old baby. So you put yourself in my shoes and I go like, it's obvious how bad this is getting and what's occurring. And I'm wondering how the future plays out. Is United States still the best country to be in, as if I'm correct in that tic-tac-toe of the movement of this? Are you better being in countries that aren't G7 countries, or do you think America will divide? You used to talk about secession, and honestly, I thought you were kind of a crackpot on that one for a little while. But I don't know whether it'll happen, but I do believe it's the only reasonable solution for the United States, and I'm rooting for it now personally. Because I would love to be able to at least still spend half the year here, maybe all the time in the United States, but I would feel I don't want to do it unless there's secession. So I'm just wondering, how do you think it plays itself out globally? Are there going to be better countries, worse countries? Will the United States ever secede, or will it just move to this total, medical tyranny, USSA type of situation? What's your thoughts on all that?
Well, look, these horrible people, the kind of people that go to the World Economic Forum in Davos, or for that matter, are members of Bilderberg, or for that matter, are members of the Council on Foreign Relations, or for that matter, members of Bohemian Grove. They're all the same damn people. Captains of industry and top generals and so forth. Okay, what do these people have? it's not a conspiracy as such. I mean, even though this guy Schwab looks like a James Bond style villain with a bald cat, but they share views and they share philosophies and they've all gone to the same schools and so forth, pretty much. So it's not a formal conspiracy, but their interests are pretty much aligned and they all talk to each other. So things are going to keep developing in that direction. Uh, I don't know. I'm going off the
So
question.
where do you think it goes? Do you think that where do you think the United States goes, and where do you think the world goes? Do you think that the United States is going to be the birth center of this type of, technocratic uh, social credit score system? Do you think it'll be
Yeah.
better in other countries?
What these guys have planned, I think, or what they want, is the equivalent of a color revolution, which have done in a number of countries, because the United States is different. In fact, I don't want to sound like a Republican. I don't particularly like Republicans, but the Republicans are always talking about how the US is different and special, and they're right about that. Just not quite in the way they think of, because the United States is the only country in world history ever that was founded on a certain set of values. Other countries weren't. And by that, I'm talking about free thought and free speech. I mean, these things are promoted as American values. No other country promotes them as intrinsic values. Free markets, limited government, individualism, entrepreneurialism, rationality, the concept of progress, property rights, the rule of law. Uh, these things are uniquely American concepts that are like ingrained in this country and no other country, quite frankly. So if they can destroy the idea of America, and they're trying to do that with everything from pulling down statues to, you know, promoting Marxism, which they've been very effective in schools and so forth. Yeah, yeah, that's what's going on. They bring down America, and then there's really no place
So
to
do you
run and
think that
hide.
they will, or do you think secession is a real possibility? Do you think that's just wishful
Uh,
thinking? Do you think that something like that could occur?
yeah, it is kind of wistful thinking because the unpleasantness of 1861 to 1865 was not a civil war; it was secession on the part of the South. But the government in Washington didn't want to have a major income source. We could have a separate discussion about what actually happened during the so-called Civil War. So no, anybody tries to secede, they're not going to allow it to happen because it might get out of control, and then their whole game is unmocked. But I think secession. Look, my ideal scenario is that there be 7 billion little nation states in the world, uh, where if one person invades another and says, "Take me to your leader," he doesn't take him to Washington D.C. He takes him home to his wife. I don't believe in politics as a way of relating between people. Well, what that does is it it makes criminality force. That's what politics is all about. It's not about voluntarism; it's about force. What it does is it concretizes it as a way to relate, and people should not think politically just for that reason. I know the world is organized that way. It's not going to change. Secession's not going to work until things get bad enough, where which they do sometimes. But
So give me a Doug Casey history lesson on the color revolution. Uh, and you said you think they're trying to do it now. So give me a Doug Casey history class on the color revolution.
well, all of these places like Ukraine and Iraq, for that matter, and Syria and Libya, and there are other countries. Uh, Basically, we go in there and try to install the idea of democracy as the will of the people. And really, it's not. It's just changing the old regime for one that is more closely under the control of the US, which is rather odd because the US is a failing empire at this point. The US government is totally and absolutely bankrupt and desperate to keep itself alive. The US as a country, actually, despite all the wealth we have here, is actually quite bankrupt. So, color revolutions. It's kind of a kinder and gentler way of changing regimes. And places where it's been done, in the Ukraine, uh, that scumbag who was running the Ukraine before the current scumbag was running it, they painted him as being corrupt and a bad guy and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's all true. But he's been replaced with somebody that's even more corrupt and more of a bad guy. But he gets better press because he's our bad guy, okay? And it's like Saddam Hussein, who was our best buddy and was our proxy in the war against Iran, where well over 1 million soldiers died when Iraq attacked Iran. And we subsidized Saddam Hussein throughout that whole war. But then we felt we had to replace him. But oddly, because Iraq isn't a real country, I mean, at best, it's three separate and distinct countries. Another sort of, we could talk about that. Shouldn't be one country. Uh, Listen,
When was the last color revolution or the most famous color revolution?
when was the last one? Maybe it was the Ukraine. Maybe it was the Ukraine, where they made Russia into the bad guy in that. Because remember, there were a couple of provinces on the Russian border that are really more Russian than they are Ukrainian. Okay. And when we replaced the scumbag that was running Ukraine, but he was popularly elected by the Ukrainian people, with a new scumbag, which kowtows to the U.S. And so that was the last one.
And what are some of the qualities of a color revolution? You said a gentler way. So you're saying instead of a violent civil war, how is the color revolution demonstrated?
Well, what kind of a color revolution are we going to have in the U.S., for instance? Uh, you notice that sometimes, purple's an odd color to wear for a tie. And there was a time after the Biden victory when a lot of broadcasters on CNN and MSNBC were wearing purple ties, and Hillary was wearing purple dresses and so forth. Uh, Red and blue merged together, and it's purple. So it's kind of like a uniparty, a unistate, uh, where they want to avoid violence. Violence is destructive. You can get hurt. People say bad things about you later if there's too much violence. So it's just what they're calling a move towards a universal welfare state. It's not socialism, actually, exactly, because socialism technically is a system where the state owns the means of production. Well, that doesn't work, and they know it. So it's what everybody's going towards is a welfare state where everybody is controlled, different from socialism. So you shouldn't really call it socialism. That's
Okay,
what it's all about.
so where do we go from here as we wrap up? It is September 2021. Uh, Things stand relatively stable and the same, and we see just some creeping up of inflation and some more jargon, and everyone stays in their houses and stays under control and docile. Or where do we go from here?
Well, look, I don't want to make a prediction on the market because uh, the US government does not want to see the stock market collapse. That would bankrupt many millions of individual people who have gotten involved in the stock market, would bankrupt pension funds. So they'll try to keep the stock market up any way they can, even if it comes down to buying stocks, actually, by the Federal Reserve. They don't want to see the bond market collapse because that would be even more serious than the stock market. And if the bond market collapses, that means interest rates go up, which means people can't afford to pay their debts. And you could have a 1929 style situation. So they're going to try to keep that going too. But these things are both, uh, they've both been built to unsustainable. I hate to use that word because it's such a politically correct, popular word today. Levels that they're both very dangerous. And when the markets do collapse, eventually, the market will overrule the money printers at the Federal Reserve. It's going to create chaos in society. And the cat can get out of the bag. People can go wild. People can lose their jobs. You can send them all the money you want, but the money's not worth anything. Supply chains could get broken. The store shelves could be emptied and not filled again. I mean, it's look. I hate to sound apocalyptic, but I think we're on the cusp of a really big change, a sea change in world civilization. And there's an excellent chance, this isn't a prediction, I'm just saying, it's a reasonable probability that we're going to know what happens in the next 6 months. And then it's Katie bar the doors. So I think we were talking about this earlier. This is a time to, sequester capital in the right form so that you can ride this thing out. Because I'm an optimist. I think civilization is going to recover. And 20 years from now, Ray Kurzweil is going to be right about the singularity. And it'll be a story with a happy ending. But in the meantime, we're in for some really, really rough going.
Doug Casey, we want to thank you for coming on today. We have all of Doug's books right there down below. His fiction series, if you're looking for an interesting and good read, and you do not want to watch the Operation Mockingbird agents on your television, be sure to check those out right there down below. Make sure you hit the like button on this video, give us a comment down below, and hit that bell notification to get notified for new episodes. What do you think is going to happen? Where do you think we're going next? Let us know your comments about what we discussed here on today's episode right there down below, and where in the world you are coming from as well. We'd love to know. So thanks for watching today's episode. Doug, I want to thank you for coming on.
Pleasure, Jake. I guess my parting words would be keep your pecker hard and your powder dry, and the world will go.
All right. I think I could take that. I could take that soundly. So that sounds great. And thank you for your time.